Welcome to Hunt the Season podcast. Yes, you are on the BackCountry Pa Podcast, formerly BackCountry Pa Podcast, but is now called Hunt the Season. Pretty much a quick synopsis of it is BackCountry has now combined with Drawback Outdoors, one of our good friends. We just wanted to put better content out there. We just wanted to, collaborate more. And we were like, you can't really, it's hard to explain like two different brands coming together, working together. It was hard to figure out. So we came to a conclusion that, hey, let's just rebrand both of our pages and start fresh pretty much with both pages. Not fresh, but like, start a new brand altogether that we both like. And we came to the conclusion of Hunt the Season. So podcast still going to be dropped the same spot. Instagrams are still going to be the same. One's going to be Hunt the Season Podcast. One's just going to be Hunt the Season, which is going to be pretty much the main page. So make sure you go on to Instagram, follow Hunt the Season. We're going to slowly try and transition everything over to that one page, so we don't have two different pages to confuse people. YouTube however, is the same one. If you're subscribed to what was the BackCountry Pa Podcast, that's where we're posting all the hunt videos, all the podcast videos, everything will be posted on the one YouTube. So that's going to be simple to do. We wanted to work together more. We're already good friends. So we're like, you know what, let's just figure this out and put our heads together and figure this out. So came up with that when we come back from Massachusetts from Huntstock. So I think it's gonna be a fun experience, put it that way. A lot more filming each other, kind of. It's going to be a lot more camp-based, I feel like. A lot more communication, a lot more everything, really. But to get in this episode, so this is like the first episode of Hunt the Season. So it's pretty cool. Even though it's like episode 252 or 253, something like that. This one is with Greg Kazmierski. This one's called Reading the Land and Sign, pretty much. This is part of the Woodsmanship series. We wanted to have Greg on here because, he is great with the reading the sign. He puts out great information on his Instagram page to pretty much help everyone out. Like it's pretty interesting. I'm going to look it up here quick so you guys know what it is. Greg _ next level whitetail on IG. So he's been grinding. He puts like, tree stand overlooking a thermal hub. He gives you like a quick rundown, quick little reels of quick information to put out there. How to rubs help locate early season bucks, 3 late summer trail cam locations. You're a mature buck and you're about to visit your last scrape. So it's just, he puts out a lot of good information. And I was like, who better to have on for Reading the Land and Sign? Because it's hard to build woodsmanship, especially if you're going in a new area. You don't necessarily know sometimes what you're looking for. So we break down a lot of the stuff. We talk about, the different land features, the ridges, the saddles, et cetera, et cetera. We talk about the signs, scrapes, rubs, deer droppings, tracks, beds, browse, etc. Hair and crossings, how to determine what's important, what's not important, how to tell when the sign is from early, mid, rut, or late season time frame. Kind of the hard, soft edges. We talk about that too, because I hear people talk about hard and soft edges, but I don't really know what that really means, to be honest with you. So I break that down too. The shift of whitetails. We talk about when they shift and what that looks like. Understanding how they're used, the beds, why deer droppings may be the key. So deer droppings in general might be the key to things. It's just a really great conversation with Greg. Really, really fun conversation with him. We talk not only about like that stuff that I just mentioned, but we also talk about just the learning curve when you listen to so many podcasts and you think, oh, once I go into the woods, I'm automatically going to get on a deer because I listened to this podcast and heard what they had to say. Sometimes it's overwhelming when you listen to that many podcasts with so much intel or tactics or whatever, and you don't know what to do. Like, woodsmanship is built through failures. That's a big thing I've learned from all this stuff, even the last 4 years. It's built through the failures. So obviously partners still have the same partners for this series, for Hunt the Season. So it's still the same. XOP On X Deer Hunter Synthetic Scrape System. Go get some scrape stuff. We will be doing a giveaway, so we will be giving away a Spy Point camera, not a cell camera, a Spy Point regular trail camera, a set of Deer Hunter Synthetic scrape mix for in season. Also, we'll be giving a new hat away for hunt the season, and some decals, all that kind of stuff. Everett's Guns in Dornsiff, PA. Go check them out if you want to check out some used guns, box blinds, boots, and Code of Silence camo. Go up there, check it out. Campco we did change the code for Campco. It is HTS. That'll save you 10% off. Eventually, he will have the new hats on the website for the new brand. We will also probably be selling a shirt through his website as well for pre-order. So stay tuned for that. Be pretty cool. Deer Age, as of right now, Deer Age is the same code, save 10% off. BackCountry Pa, that'll be all capitals. Eventually, that code will be changing, but I want to make this transition smooth first. So right now, we'll just stick with BackCountry Pa. That'll save you 10% off your entire order. I wanted to, like last episode, I kind of found an article that that I thought was very interesting. So once I pull it up here, I will read it to you. It was actually pretty interesting. The title right off the bat, it's from Outdoor Life. It says, New Mexico governor fires wildlife commissioner after leaked emails between her and anti-wolfers. The decision to remove Sabrina Pack came the day after emails were published revealing her private communication with ranchers around Mexican wolves. Oh, there was just a conflict of interest, seems like. It seems like she was communicating with the Cattle Growers Association and a county commissioner regarding a strategic marketing plan around Mexican wolves, probably to help the livestock that they were selling. And the failure to communicate this with the organization led to her firing because it was a conflict of interest. Those emails showed that Pack, in her role at Sky West, was working on and revising a marketing plan with Patterson and McQueen that was aimed at shifting public sentiment and conversation around wolf management in New Mexico. This included a coordinated media campaign that was meant to elevate the voices of rural New Mexicans and others living with the consequences of federal wolf management, shifting public awareness and driving more balanced policy conversation across state and national audiences, according to one email that includes an executive summary of the strategic marketing plan, Wolves Among Us. So it sounds like they were trying to get the wolves out of this one area where she had a conflict of interest at, which has led to her firing, which is good. I think if you have a conflict of interest and it benefits you more than it does other ranchers, then yes, I think you should be let go, because it's not for the good of everyone. That's just the good for you. But then you move them to this other ranch, they have more issues. So I don't know. That's political stuff all the time. Political stuff like that happens all the time. And I think more people should get caught with it and more people should be let go because it's a conflict of interest. But I want to thank you guys for listening. Nothing is changing with the podcast. Just I'm still hosting it. The podcast is going to be the same way, just possibly more waterfowl, more turkey, more everything talk, just in general. I'm still have a deep passion for whitetail, so nothing's really changing with that. But I want to thank Greg for coming on the podcast, talking to me about whitetails and, help me out a little bit. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Remember to go give us a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, subscribe to our YouTube channel, go follow us on Instagram, all the above. Go check out the partners in the description. And there are some affiliate codes down there, so go check those out. That helps us make just a little bit more money. If you click on them, just click on them. That's all I ask. I don't care if you buy anything, just click on them. But keep hunting, keep fishing, and always enjoy the freaking process. See you guys. This is the Woodsmanship series that's going to be dropping probably around the July, August, like when everyone's mind is kind of switching to that, then running trail cameras, getting ready. But before we get into that, introduce yourself to listeners, a little synopsis who haven't heard I think you're on 2 or 3 times in the past. Mm-hmm. So give a little synopsis of who you are and what you're about.
So my name's Greg Kazmierski. I live down in Southern Ohio, and I grew up in northern mid-Michigan, or the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, I should say, and just grew up hunting. My dad had a really strong hunting culture, and it was just like really traditional Michigan hunting style where we had a deer camp. Always the same group of guys that went up there. We all kind of had our own spots, and everybody would just go out and hunt. And so I was embedded into the hunting culture from a really young age and just really fell in love with that. And then that just kind of tied right into the sense of adventure that I got when I became a teenager and was able to start driving. And that's when I kind of found out that you could just hunt public land wherever you wanted. So I had my first truck. I had a S10 and I got a bow and I just started hunting public land, and I'd chase bucks all over the place in Michigan. And then once I finally got a little bit older and actually had more than a couple $100 in my bank account, I started making out-of-state trips to Ohio and realized there's a lot bigger bucks down there. So started making out-of-state trips to hunt public land in southern Ohio and just really fell in love with it. And that really tied into what I do now professionally. So I help people design and develop hunting properties all over southern Ohio and the surrounding states. And then I'm also a land agent for real estate in Ohio as well. So really just whitetail focused 24/7, moved down to southern Ohio, not just to start the business, but also just because really just torn up with chasing big whitetails around. And in my mind, it's really no better place to do it than southern Ohio. It's the perfect mix of rugged terrain and big deer. So it's just, it's got me in my happy place, man. I'm just living, just really loving every minute that I am down there now. So I'm in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, that's, if anyone wants to hear a funny S10 story, go back to the previous episode that Greg was on for this and hear the whole story on that one.
Yeah.
Where you got stuck in the mountains and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
that was a
I
funny
got
story.
a lot of them.
Yep. But the funny thing is, like, I was thinking about this today, you know, everyone, like, from you moving to southern Ohio, you wanted to chase big deer. I mean, there's for Michigan, there's big deer in Michigan, right? Like for PA, there's big deer in PA, but you gotta, I think everyone just, they see on social media and they see big bucks, right? And they're like, oh, that's what I want to shoot. I want to shoot that big buck. But in reality, you have to put yourself in perspective of where you are, of what a big buck is. So like in Michigan, a big buck up there is completely different than southern Ohio, or like a Michigan big buck is different than a PA big buck, like, because PA is getting some big buck here, but once again, you still got to find them. And that's kind of like, that ties into this whole series that we're doing right now, the Woodsmanship series. And you're on for the reading the land and the sign that's putting down in whatever terrain you're hunting, whatever state you're hunting. And I think, like, how I've been doing these is like, just, it's a conversation. Like, if you have questions for me, you ask me, and if I have questions for you, I'll ask you, like, all kinds of stuff. But I think if we just have a full-blown discussion and like what we're thinking and what we're talking about, like, I think that's going to be the best way people can possibly learn from it. Because the best way to do it, honestly, is boots on the ground. Like, that's the best way to do any of this.
Absolutely. And just to touch on more, like when I was making all those trips heading down to Ohio, that was really at the start when podcasts really became on the rise. And I was constantly consuming all of the podcast content that I could on my drives to and from, because it was a 5-hour trip one way. So I was listening to so much, getting all of this tactic ideas. And when I first started doing it, I was following the tactics from all of these big buck hunters, and it wasn't clicking. Nothing was working. I wasn't seeing the deer. It just didn't make any sense. And then it finally clicked to me that, like, those tactics can only take you so far, but it's the woodsmanship, and it's actually being aware of the present moment when you're out there hunting or scouting. That's what's going to allow you to grow as a hunter, because those tactics are great. And then it's almost like this weird shift that when you focus more on this woodsmanship perspective, is that those tactics are just going to pop into your mind and be like, oh, you know what, this would be a really good scenario for me to fill in this X tactic, and I'm going to have good luck if I do that. But if you don't start with that woodsmanship and just really understanding why the deer are doing what it is that they are in the area you're hunting, it's just, you're always going to be a couple of steps behind.
Do you think, I feel like everyone goes through that, like when the podcast first came about, like I was the same way, where it's like, oh, how do you hunt during the rut? How do you set up for this? Where are deer going to bed? Like everyone's looking up that kind of stuff on like Apple or Spotify. Like, was that something you were doing too? Because I was 100% doing that.
100%, man. And that's it. It was just, I know like the first podcast I really dove into was the Wired to Hunt podcast with Mark Kenyon. That was like the big one out there, and it was all of the big guys, and it was just like anything specific. If I was going down for a rut trip, then I was like always looking at like the rut based podcasts or whatever it may be. And but yeah, I feel like that's the same for everyone. And then I feel like, I don't know if this is everyone, but I know that you almost feel like you know a lot, and then you start getting humbled a lot. And when you start to get humbled, that's when I feel that this woodsmanship really starts to come in, because then you realize that it's about such a deeper connection to the land than just going out there and filling tags. It's just you're really putting yourself into this environment with all of these animals that live out there on a day-to-day basis, and it's just you're just trying to figure out, how can I fit into this without disturbing too much.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way about that, because I feel like once you start actually doing it and seeing the things happening in the woods, you start putting the pieces together, especially with the tactics and the tips and tactics you hear on all these podcasts. I mean, we've done a lot of those like tips and tactics type things, but like I feel like there has to be that fine line, right? Like you can listen to them, hear all those, but then you have to actually physically go out and do that. Like not every buck beds on a point is what I learned very quickly. Like it's like I found one that was like, you look at the map, it's like that's a point right there. And I went to that point and there was a big buck bed. Like you could it was there. That was the only one. I went to multiple points, and that's not the case in all points. Like it's not all the same. Like in a general area, yeah, you probably will get lucky. There probably will be a buck there, certain beds, But yeah, I mean, you hear those tips and tactics, like automatically you just want to do that right away, especially if you're a new adult onset hunter, or if you're a new hunter, young hunter in general. Like if you're new to listen to the podcast, you're probably going to hear that, be like, I'm going to try that. Right. Another thing that before we get into it, another thing that I was like big on when I first started, like the podcast and everything like that, like buying all these scents or lures that I think like would automatically like bring in a deer. Like it'd be like, okay, this is going to bring in a deer right here, because I'll spray it and they'll just automatically just all come in, because just like on like TV.
So true, man. It's I still see that a lot with when I run into guys on public land, and I love it, like, because I don't want to sit here and say that I'm so much further ahead, because I'll never think like that. But when I see those guys that are so excited and at that stage that I was at, it's like more like nostalgia type feeling, because I remember when I was there, and it's just like, you think you got the magic potion right there in your hand of what's going to solve all these problems. And then after a while, you like begin to realize, and you look back and you just think about like, man, I can't believe that's what I actually thought was the ticket to success. And it's great. I love that. And I definitely went through that phase as well. I was making crazy amounts of scrapes with crazy amounts of scents all over the place.
I was like, man, I'm going to put some tinks. I'm going to put like this stuff. I'm not bashing any of this stuff, because sometimes it does work in certain areas, but like, I remember this 9-point that I got up in Clinton County. I used a doe estrus spray. Like it was one of those can things where like it was doe and heat, and it like sprayed the whole thing. And that's when I first started to have my mobile setup, where it was like a big game captain's chair with like the muddy steps and all that kind of stuff. I was like, this is mobile to me. I'm set up in a pine tree. I can see for a rifle. I can see, I don't know, like 500, 600 yards. And I spray it, and then 2 doe come busting up underneath me, and he comes out. I'm like, oh, he came out because of that right there. So, but then I quickly got over that. I was like, he didn't come out because of that. There was other reasons for that happened. But yeah, it's funny how, we buy all this stuff and think it's going to help us. But, woodsmanship plays a role in all that stuff you use. Like you have to know the right time, the right place to use that stuff. So
absolutely.
There's two sides of this, right? It's the land features and the deer sign with those land features, kind of. So do you want to start off with maybe land features first, or do you want to do the sign first? What do you think would be better?
I think since you kind of already started touching on like what you notice with that point, I think that going into the land features is a good place to start, and you can kind of tie that right into the sign because like I think that talking about woodsmanship, there's a reason why that point where you found that buck bed is there, and there's a reason why those other points there isn't a buck bed there. So I know that I messaged you about this, but a little while back I came up just with an acronym that I can use to really just try to break down a piece of hunting ground, whether I'm scouting or whether I'm hunting. Acronyms DEER. So it's define, expect, evaluate, and refine. So you are first defining what it is that you're trying to seek out. Are you trying to fill a tag, or like in this case, you were out scouting and you went out onto this point and then you're expecting to find a buck bed there because that's what you listen to on a podcast. So that's what you're defining. And then expecting it is going out, and when you're looking, you're expecting to find that buck bed there. And then now you're evaluating. Okay, point A did have this buck bed, but point C, D, E, and F, none of those had any buck bed. So now you're starting to evaluate why exactly did point A have a buck bed, but none of these other points, why didn't they have a buck bed? And you start to break down what was the habitat like? What is the hunting access like? Is there a tree stand set up really close to that point? All of these different features are going to go into play, and then it's refined. You're refining your results based off of what you evaluated, and there's that reason why point A had that buck bed. So now you can begin to just look for point features that looked like point A. And more than likely, if you can find more characteristics on a point like that, it's probably going to have a buck bed on it. And then you can use this just like quick little 4-step approach to figure out really anything, whether it's a bedding area, where a deer feeding, or any of these types of features. And then you can start to narrow it down once you already have these features you want to target narrowed down.
And I want to let's stick with that point, because that's actually, to me, I haven't found many points like that. I want to see if maybe you have. Like, so this point, it's like a skinny, comes to a very skinny point, steep on both sides where the bed would be, and as you walk to it, it's a cut. So like it's very thick behind there and very thick on the sides too. And when you get out to this point, it's wide open with a couple pine trees and a few rocks here and there. So the beds I found were underneath these pine trees at this point, and he had an escape route going down the front of the hill that was steep. So like the only way a hunter could get in there without like possibly even sneak up on him would be like you'd have to go through this cut extremely slow and in the right wind, where the wind would be possibly blowing in your face, but yet also you'd have thermals where like in mountain country like that, like you're going to have a lot of thermals and wind's going to swirl in that area too. So it was like one of those perfect beds where it's hard to find those on points.
Yes, absolutely. And I think like the first thing that you touched on there is like something that I'm always looking for when it comes to bedding on points is you have that thick wall of back cover there, where usually when they are laying out on the point, they have that wind coming over top of their back. But usually I will find, especially down in Ohio here in our hills, because we get very skinny tops like that as well. And anytime there's a nice thick green briar patch before you get out to the end of that point, that's like, as I'm walking down the spine of the ridge, if I see that briar patch, like my mind's already turning like, okay, there's a good chance I'm going to find a buck bed out here. Because if something to sneak through that without alerting that buck for him to escape down his trail, it's just not likely that it's going to happen. So that's one of the things that I've learned from all of these beds I found on points. Like I need to have that or some other type of back cover, and then I know that there's a greater chance that he's going to be bedded out there.
And that kind of ties into the sign too for that type of area for points. Of what I found when I was walking that, on both sides of that, there were rubs going like on the edge of that like cut. And like, it's not hard to explain, but there's a cut on top and then that thick stuff laurel on like the sides, but there's like, it's really steep. So like he could just cruise right along that side of that cut out to there. And then he can go in one way and come out the other way where there's no bedding by that laurel right there. So like, that's what I found with that point. Like if you start seeing that, let's use your woodsmanship there. Like, okay, I see rubs going out to the point, this is probably the way he goes to this point. And if you see rubs obviously going the other way on the other side, then it's like, okay, he's probably leaving this way on certain winds. So now you got to be like, okay, the wind's blowing up this hill or to him, which way is he going to go? Right.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And then you can really start to figure out based off of like using those rubs to kind of tie in that, you can really start to predict like what would the wind have to be for him to use this trail.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it can be different. Like sometimes deer do very random things and they may be walking with the wind blowing over their back. But let's just say that we're assuming that this deer needs some type of wind advantage to head down that trail that we're following. Mm-hmm. You can have that idea that, okay, when he uses this trail, I know that it's going to be a northwest wind because that is coming over his shoulder. That's giving him that wind advantage of where he wants to walk into. And then you can begin to craft an approach along that trail or wherever you believe he's headed, whether maybe there's a doe bedding area or maybe there's an acorn flat or maybe he's dropping down to an ag field that's a mile away, whatever it may be, you know that he's going to use that on those northwest winds. So now it's like the only problem I have to solve is how can I get to this trail system on a northwest wind without him finding me in that bed? So that's just where you're always trying to take that next step to just figure it out. How can I keep figuring out where's my best setup around here?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things is the setup in that kind of situation where it's like you have that skinny point. There's really nowhere to set up a tree. Like you'd have to maybe if there's a tree in the middle of that cut to be able to see out there. Like you'd have to climb up like 30 feet to be able to see out to that point. And then if you pick the wrong side, it's like you're shooting 50-50 right there. Like, because even if the wind you think is perfect, it's like, I mean, deer things where it's like.
Exactly. Deer. But yeah. I always like to place my bet on what they should be doing. And knowing because if I can find a setup where the deer should be doing something based off of the terrain, based off of what the signs tell me and what the wind direction is, then I know that I can get a bulletproof setup where I can get in there, have a high odd sit and feel good the whole time I'm on the stand that something's going to happen. But I don't want to just go out there and hope anymore. Especially now, like we were talking before we started the episode about dad life, and it's like, there's limited time in dad life to be up in a tree. So I need to make it count when I'm out there.
And that's 100% how I felt last year. Like I was like, for the area I was hunting, it was like, I had to pick the right wind, the right temperature, the right everything. Like I was being more calculated with my approach to this area. It's like, I know there's a primary scrape right here. It's a thermal hub, all the stuff, like there's doe bedding around. There's not a ton of buck rubs, so I just know they're going to check this scrape at some point. It's like wait for the wind to be right, wait for that time to be right, where it's like it's close to that pre-rut time frame, and get in there and hunt. Like, and I did it, and like I had an opportunity at a really nice buck, and just I blew it. But yet also, I was like, even though I had that, a couple of days later, I was thinking about it. I was like, man, like I should be pretty proud about that I actually waited to go into that spot until the time, temperature, wind, everything was right. Like it does help a lot. Like being a dad takes time out of the woods, but also it helps you think a little bit. It's like, okay, I got to be smart with this.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that if you can just like learn to reframe your mind to look at an event like that as a success and not filling your tag as a success, like that's just that confirmation that you need to keep doing that. So although the shot didn't come through and it didn't work out where you got to fill your tag on that buck, you still did everything you needed to do to get in where you needed to be on the day that you needed to be there. Because in reality, even though all of those conditions lined up the way that they did, there's only so many days out of a fall that buck is going to do what he did that evening in daylight hours. So you only have that limited time, but you chose one of the right days. So it's something that you definitely need to hang your hat on and be proud of, because that's a win to me. Like I'll take that. Obviously I want to fill my buck tag, but it's like, if I can continuously get these opportunities to get these old bucks in bow range like that, or within close proximity to bow range, then that's a win to me, because I'm doing all the things right.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's something, it's easier said than done, right? Because like I had multiple buck encounters and I was able to get one down at least, but like I think back on the season, like, man, like you had pretty good encounters with buck, but it takes I don't know, it's weird because it takes you getting that success with getting a buck down to look back then and think, okay, I did have success with all these encounters, like just being in like the same part of the big woods as other buck. It's like
Yeah.
the big woods is, well, it's big,
Oh,
right?
yeah, it's big. There's a lot of timber there.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you're 100% right. Like we have to try and retrain our mind to think that way. That's the
Yeah.
only way you're going to honestly get better at it too.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that you can retrain your mind too, in the sense of when you're out there and scouting, of what do you consider to be a productive scouting experience. And like that's where like that acronym that I was talking about earlier, if you can define a very specific objective of what you're trying to accomplish and really figure it out and go through those step-by-step process, like you are going to become a better woodsman because you're actively understanding why the deer are doing what they're doing. And then it's like when you show up there in the season, it's just things are going to click for you because you already did all of the prep work to put you in the right spot.
Yeah, I mean, that 100% connects into like that type of terrain and sign that I want to compare, because there's this one spot that I found during rifle. I jumped a bunch of deer there, and then I went back and I scouted it after the season. And I was like, my thought is always like, well, recently was like, why was my deer here? Why the buck that I shoot? Why was he in this area? Because it made no sense for where he was, where I shot him. And I was like, doesn't make much sense of why he was here. So I went back in. It was like you're not going to see it really on a topo map, but it was like a ridge. It was like a flat ridge/bench that they were traveling on after scouting this, and it was tore up with sign. Scrapes, rubs, bedding, everything was right there. Deer crap, which is one thing that I think we should really touch on too. But you're right. Like finding the sign in the right areas. If you have success in an area, or even if you saw a deer in an area, go back in there and find out like why he was there or why she was there. There has to be a reason that deer was there.
Yeah. And honestly, that's how I've pivoted my trail camera use to really help me grow as a woodsman. Very rarely anymore am I using trail cameras to try to target a deer during the season. It's more so just hang them out there and let them soak for the full year. And just with all of the technology out there of how we can backlog all of that trail camera data, like if you have a trail camera and you have either one buck on multiple cameras or just one camera that had a lot of bucks on it, you can figure out what the weather was exactly when that buck was there. And with how accurate things are, you can get a pretty good idea of what that wind direction should be. And you can put yourself there in the off season and say, okay, this buck came through here at 10 o'clock in the morning and it was a northwest wind. Why was he here and where was he going? And you can just start walking around and you're going to figure it out. And I've found that like trail cameras are such a valuable tool to grow as a woodsman, like when you're using them the right way.
Yes.
And you have you have an unlimited amount of data points to figure out why. And then that's a really effective scouting method. If somebody feels like I'm going out here and I don't really know what to look for, just do that trail camera method. And then you're going to be able to connect the dots, because especially with older bucks, you know, they definitely can do random things, but the majority of the time it's very calculated what they're doing and where they're going. So if you have all of the necessary data points, you can figure that out, and then you're going to be able to piece that puzzle together. And those are typically how I find some of my better setups, is by doing things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in an area right now where I'm looking at two sheds in front of me right now that I would shoot either one of these buck, and like they're both in the same area. They're older bucks. Like one's older than the other one. I can tell just by the body and like all the genetics type stuff. But like, yeah, I mean, the trail camera data is 100%. You're 100% right with that. Like I let my camera soak all year, went in there and had tons of data to put in. And this is the first year. Well, actually, I have like everything written down on paper of like times, daylight, dark, and all that kind of stuff. This first year, Ethan made fun of me because he thought I would be the one to do that. And turns out I was the one to do that. But,
yeah,
you know, it's fun. it's like it makes you in the off season, you can't be out there scouting all the time. So like you're putting all this stuff down, your woodsmanship is growing just by you looking at that, looking at the wind, be like, okay, where is this coming from? What was the temperature, the precipitation, the barometric pressure, all that kind of stuff. It helps you learn the area of like when these deer are possibly going to move better with more success.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, so since we're on that trail camera stuff, what would you, so that year time frame, are you running yours over scrapes or like rub lines, trails?
Yeah, man, honestly, a little bit of everything. Like really whatever seems to be, I don't know. It's like I get this gut feeling now where I'll be walking in the woods and I always just make sure I got a pack full of cams. I'm just like, this seems like a good trail camera spot, and I like to hang one up. But generally, yeah, I mean, a lot of times hanging them over scrapes, or just any kind of like pinch point that's created by the landscape where I think that there's going to be a higher amount of deer activity. I'm going to do it there too. And then also, if I do know of a good like bedding point, I will hang cameras on some of the primary entry exit routes for that. Those are generally what I'm going after.
Okay. Yeah, because I haven't done that. Like I feel like I found the entry and exit routes, but it's so hard to tell. But like with bucks, you could possibly tell with the rubs of like which way they're going. Like I found one really good bed and I found rubs all around it, and it's completely covered. So like I could kind of tell there where he is maybe exiting when he's not pressured, because a deer's not going to a buck's not going to make a rub when he's pressured. He's just going to bolt out of there. And then like where he's entering that, like he really only has one entrance route. He has two rubs side by side this trail walking into his bed, and it's completely covered by pine trees, rocks, and little saplings. So I mean, I know where his entrance route is. I know that there's scrapes above him, and I know there's rubs above him, and I know that there's a heavy trail. And I have my camera up above his bed, so like it's not on his bed, but there's a scrape with like there's a pine tree that was ripped in half, pretty much. Like it would have been this tall of a pine tree, like a 5-foot pine tree. The top of that pine tree is completely broken off, and it's just like the base of it's just ripped up. And then there's a massive scrape with like 4 licking branches. So I'm like, I feel like, and this is just my woodsmanship possibly, and I'm thinking when I'm in the area, it's like, I'm thinking that maybe when a buck gets to like his home territory, like if he's used to that bed, he's not getting pressured in that bed, he might lay a lot more sign down in that area just because he doesn't want other deer to mess with his area.
Yeah, he's just staking claim to what's his, and I feel like it's also very situational. I think that it's important to preface that is because like you see all these studies now about all of these different bucks having all of these different beds. And I think that it's very terrain and habitat specific, and how high is the deer density is usually where I'm starting as far as like how many different beds will a buck have. And I feel like that the higher the deer density is, the more bucks that an area is going to have. I feel like those bucks are a lot more like satellite based bedding type of things, because there's so much competition and there's so much going on all the time. It's almost like living in a city, like there's just, people are busy. They're just moving around all the time and doing all these different things. But it's like when you get into hill country or big timber where the deer density really starts to drop down. And I've seen this in Southern Ohio, and I've seen this up at our deer camp in the Upper Peninsula where there's very low deer densities and it's hundreds of miles apart. But it's very consistent behavior where the bucks don't bed in the same spot every single day. They definitely don't do that, but they do have these travel cycles, these big loops that they like to follow through a ridge system. And they might have however many it is, say it's 5 beds on this loop, and they're just kind of working their way around. And then they do that loop, and then they just keep doing it, and they keep doing it. So that's just something that's always important for me to talk about, is that the bedding behaviors of buck is very, very different depending on the deer density. And that's usually like the thing that I see plays the biggest role is the deer density.
Yeah. I mean, so it's funny you bring up that loop, because I was talking to to Alex from the Buck Down podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And after I shot my 6-point this year, I told him, I was like, I think this buck was the buck I jumped. And I went back to the video of my one trail camera, which he actually ran past, which was about 2 miles from where I jumped him. And it was him. And I was like, I feel like these buck in this area have a loop. Like they go on this loop. And it was 3 days after I jumped him that I pretty much shot him in the area where he was heading to my trail camera. So like, it might have been on that 4-day loop that like he might have a 4-day loop up there where he just went around. Like it was kind of not funny, but it was kind of like Kismet. It was like, okay, like in my head, like I maybe wasn't thinking about it, but maybe it was something like in the back of my head or my gut was like, okay, these buck might have a loop and they might be going around this area. Like it was just part luck there.
Yeah, I definitely see that a lot. That was something I was really trying to dial in on this year on one of the pieces that I hunt quite a bit now. It's a pretty good chunk. It's a few thousand acre piece of state forest in southern Ohio. And one of my goals out there was to try to figure out like, what does that loop look like and how many different bucks live within that loop system. So, and that's where like you asked where I put these trail cameras up. I like to put them up on like these travel pinch points. I just know that there's a very high likelihood that you're going to get at least some activity in front of those. And my goal when trying to figure out these loops is just trying to get an individual buck on as many cameras as possible. Because then once you do that, you can start plugging in dates and you can figure it out. I mean, once you have your trail cameras on a map, after gaining that level of woodsmanship where you know how deer move through the hills, you have a really good idea. Okay, he got from camera A to camera B by this route probably, and then you can start to create that. And even if you don't have the end of the puzzle, like once you start to figure out the start of the loop, you can then go out there and you can predict, you can find it, and eventually you're going to kind of figure out this is how that loop works. And I really do believe if you can figure out what that loop is, it's not like once the individual buck that's using that loop passes on, whether it fills a tag, dies of old age, like a new buck's going to filter in and use that because that's just the way that things work in that area. That's how that ridge system, that's how the bucks travel through it.
Yep. And I firmly believe that the area that I found all these scrapes, the scat, the rubs, like the whip rubs, those beds, like multiple beds, I feel like multiple bucks use that area. It's like the area is just overpopulated with sign. And I think that's one thing, like for woodsmanship, that's one thing you got to get in there. Like not every bench you find, not every bench you see on like on X or Spartan Forge or whatever map you're using is not going to be the same. They're not all created equal. Like I went to a bench today with my daughter and it was like, there was nothing there. Like it was like hardly anything on that bench. And it might be because of pressure, it might be because of area, food source, all that kind of stuff. But like you just have to go explore those type of areas to figure out if it's worth it or not. Like maybe I just stumbled into something, right? But because I had
absolutely
success in that area, you know?
Yep. Nope. I couldn't agree more.
So in I kind of want to talk about this, about like what sign is important that you can hunt. I want to dive into that in certain areas because I think that's important for woodsmanship. Is like, I feel like I've learned a lot over the last 3 years of actually putting more boot time in and exploring these areas and figuring out, okay, this area is a feeding scrape, right? It's a nighttime scrape. This here is a scrape that is possible to hunt depending on the wind, the temperature, all that kind of stuff, like my thermal hub example. For feeding, I feel like if you find a scrape in an oak flat, maybe if you want to get inventory, I would put a camera there. Like in my opinion, I don't know if I'd really want to hunt that area. I'd probably want to follow that trail back to where it's going from, see where they're bedding at and go from there. And it might lead you to another hub scrape, or it might lead you to into thick cover where there's a big scrape there. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel very similar. If I'm in excuse me, if I'm in like an open oak plant like that, I don't hold a ton of weight because I know that there's a good probability that that's going to be nighttime sign. I really only like buck sign like that, like definitely scrapes. If we're talking scrapes, I really only like those in higher stem count areas where you can't really see too far if you're standing on that scrape. And for a couple of reasons. One, I just think that that's going to be a place that they're going to visit in daylight, which in this too is kind of just ties right into it, is that in that open hardwood setting, a buck can just cruise on the downwind side of that scrape and know what's going on up there, know that nobody's around it. But in those higher stem count areas, he can't really figure it out unless he gets closer. So with that, I just generally see those higher stem count area scrapes have more daylight activity. And those are definitely where I like to target if I'm trying to hunt over or very close to being over top of a scrape.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think which scrape this year would have been exactly like that, because I had multiple scrapes in that like kind of thermal hub area. I would say the one that's up at the top. The one was up at the top was probably the hotter one, and that probably had a little bit more stem count. It had those little trees, little shrubs, all that kind of stuff. But like once it got close to that, November timeframe, all those leaves fell off. Like there wasn't much cover except for the little stems coming up. Like that was it. But in the early fall, like early October, 100%, there was a ton of leaves in there. Like you had to pick the right tree to be able to see. There was really the other scrapes I had were I didn't even hunt this year. Like I didn't even go over and look at them because it was in that laurel. Like it was in thick laurel. Like you had to laurel is great, especially when you find those openings in them. But like getting through that laurel to be able to set up on them is impossible without busting everything out.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Very, very tough. Yeah. And it's funny you say that, like about the hub scrape, because I had a very similar type of experience I've been running a trail camera on a hub scrape for years. Like the same scrape has been like a 3-year thing. And I always get good bucks on there, but they're always at night. It was like very, very rarely would I get daylight. And I don't know why it took me so long, but I was like, I'm going to figure out why. Like, I know that there's good bucks in this system. It's just they're not coming here in daylight. Well, I finally went in another 100 yards and it started getting a little bit thicker. And then I started seeing more sign. There's some rubs, some trails, everything like that. And then I just kind of kept diving in, and it wasn't 300 yards away from that initial, like what I thought was a big hub scrape, was like this just massive one. But if I honestly just stumbled across it, like I got lucky that I found it because it's just so thick and it just doesn't really make sense why it was there, but it just opens up to this beech tree. And then there was just this massive scrape. Run a camera on it in the first year, all those bucks that were nighttime activity was all daylight activity at this scrape. So it's like, that's definitely like, those are the types of things that is the confirmation that I need to know, okay, I'm just going to focus on these scrapes that are in the higher stem count areas and thicker, because that's where the bucks are during daylight hours.
Yeah, I mean, it's something with those beech trees. Like, every time I see one off in the distance, I'm always like, okay, there's going to be a scrape underneath that tree.
I gotta go check that out. Yeah.
There's always those little bit of orange leaves on the tree. I'm like, that one's good. I guarantee you it's those or pine trees.
Yep.
That I'm always like, okay, there's going to be scrape underneath, especially in those areas.
Yes.
I mean, in your eyes, what would be a perfect scrape for you? Like when you walk up to it, it's like, okay, I mean, I know obviously the big scrapes are hot, do those, but like I find from the amount of miles I put on, it's like I don't see them as much anymore. I think because people are out scouting more. Like there's not a ton of people out scouting, but there's more pressure getting put on them throughout the season. So I think they're trying to. Deer are smart. I think they adapt. I think they're starting to maybe not make them as big. Yeah. So like, what's a good scrape for you?
So definitely, like the first thing that I love to see is that if you can find a tree that's just been worn out and you can see that it's got like multiple licking branches, ones that have just been broken off because of so much use, and then they're like still using that on one of the fresh branches. And that's why I like really looking at those beech trees, is because there's usually so many branches that once they do wear one out and it's down to a nub, like they'll just move over to another one under that same beech tree. So as far as the scrape itself, I would say that like that's definitely the perfect one, is when you got multiple licking branches like that, either active or just historical. And then other than that, if I want to set up and hunt a scrape, I really like finding one that has some type of terrain advantage for me or a terrain disadvantage for the deer, where if a buck wanted to come, if I could like draw up the perfect scenario, if this buck's coming downwind to come into the scrape location, he has some type of visual block, whether it be like the rounding part of a hill, a slight little hub or point that comes over the top, anything like that, where he has to physically come over that terrain feature in order to get to that scrape. And then when he gets over that terrain feature, he's already in bow range. So that way I don't even have to worry about him getting to that scrape. It's just once he exposes himself, wherever that exposure point is, if I can get that within close proximity to that scrape, then that's like my perfect scenario.
That I love the beech trees. One, I mean, I think every scrape hunter loves beech trees.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. But I have personally been drawn to these. It's a laurel, like it's a big laurel bush, like really high, and you can tell it from a distance because you start seeing brown leaves on them. Like they don't break the branches off until they're worn out, like they do with the beeches. But I found at least 3 that have that, where like you can see this a brown part of this, like the leaves are just brown, and I know that they're using that. Like I think it's something with those leaves, especially with beech trees too. I think it's just something that holds a scent a little longer. It just stays there just a little bit longer, and they have more movement to them. Like especially if they're using their rack in there, like they can maybe feel like they're doing more with it. Because I mean I've seen, the big buck that I have on camera, he only hit 1 scrape that I know of. I found more after the season that I think he may be hitting. Like there was only 1 time where he really got up and started thrashing that thing, and that was it. And every other scrape he would just like walk right by, not do anything with. But if there was leaves in that tree, that's when he wanted to hit it.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because I saw that a lot this year. I started running a lot of my cameras on video mode, and man, there's so many different occurrences of so many different bucks that were really like getting up on their back feet and just rubbing in the leaves of those beech trees. I just absolutely were loving it. And it was consistent from scrapes that were up high in elevation, down low in elevation, that were different bucks, young bucks, old bucks. Like it happened enough to know like, okay, this is why that they love these beech trees. They just love messing around with these branches.
They love the sound of themselves doing it.
Right. Yeah. Whatever it is. I guess that's if we could figure out the answer to that question one day. But man, it's definitely a very common thing.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense why they like laurel, beech trees, and also pines, because pines, they never lose their needles. Unless they're knocked off by the rack of the buck. So like it makes sense. Maybe it just holds it on there just a little bit longer. Like, there's going to be other trees that they use that it just depends where they are. Because the one by that buck's bed that I was describing earlier, I know he has a big licking branch broken off and it's like torn up, but there's no leaves on the tree. So like that there, like every situation is different, where he might not need to do that if he just wanted to lay his scent on there. But I mean, it makes you think now, because I never really thought about it. Like there's something with those leaves that they like if all those leaves fall off the laurel bush, will they still use that to make a scrape on? Like I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see.
It's definitely a very interesting thought. One of the enjoyable things to ponder on.
There's always something. We're always trying. So watching the Americas thing on Peacock, it was over 5 years, right? They did that over 5 years of following these animals around. So they followed the blue whale around, and for the first time ever, they saw pretty much 3 males pretty much dancing to try and get 1 female. They never knew about this the whole time of blue whales being around, right? So it's like this is they said this is changing the way we look at the nature and the blue whale and all this stuff. So it's made me think. It was like, we always think we have these deer figured out. We always think we have this figured out, but like it took them how long to figure this out about blue whales, which is blue whales are one of the biggest whales is the biggest mammal in the world.
Yeah.
So it's like,
that's so true. And it's
crazy.
such like a niche hobby. I mean, there's a lot of deer hunters, but there's only so many people that love it enough to have conversations like this and listen to conversations like this. And we really only know so much, because there's only so many people out there that are really trying to figure out more and more every year. And I think it's always good to have that kind of sense of wonder of why are they doing that too, because I think that just brings joy to the chase.
I mean, I think if it comes to a point where it's like, I'm not even going to be thinking about it anymore, where it's like, I don't even want to know why they're doing this, I think then my passion for hunting is gone, because like that's the fun part, is like thinking to myself, like I'm out there scouting, like when I'm walking through the woods now, especially when it kind of helps when you're self-film too, because you're like walking and you're like talking to yourself as you're going, like, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? Like, okay, why is this bed here? And it makes you really think a lot more. I mean, obviously not everyone can self-film, but like it helps a lot. I think when you can look back and be like, oh wow, look at this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the why statement there, that's such a good point. And that was one of the first things, like honestly, probably the biggest core memory from my early podcast listening days. I can't remember if it was a guest on the Wired to Hunt podcast or if it was just Mark Kenyon speaking on a solo one, but he said that about how he's always asking why something's happening. And that was like one of the light bulb moments where things really clicked for me, and I started doing that. And it's just such a simple thing to do. Just ask why. And if you just keep asking why, it's incredible the amount of things that you can learn out in the woods, because the answer is right there. Because they're not out there doing random things. Although it might seem random to us, they're a pretty simple creature, like they want a safe place to sleep and they want to keep their bellies full. And then for a couple weeks out of the year, they want to breed. And other than that, like that's pretty much it. So if you can kind of just keep that in mind and keep asking yourself why, you're going to be able to figure some stuff out.
Yeah. So there's two things I really want to talk about before we end the podcast. And if there's anything else you had written down, because I know you had notes too that you want to talk about. I want to talk about rubs. So vertical versus horizontal. I feel like horizontal is like something very rare you find in the woods. And I want to hold more value in a horizontal rubs than a vertical rub, but yet also it depends on that vertical rub, right? Of how, like, maybe he's just rubbing off his velvet in September or August. And then there's somewhere it's like he's building up his neck, getting ready for the rut. Or there's somewhere it's like he's just laying down sign just to lay down sign in its feeding area. There's different types of rubs. And like, that's why I've been looking at these rubs like, man, this is something, like there's something about these rubs. Like when you see in a really, like those whip rubs, right? Like the thumb size rubs that are broken off. It's like that buck is aggressive. He was fired up. Like, why was he fired up? You see ones that are on big trees that are just rubbed like normal. It's like that was maybe just a feeding, or maybe he's just, wants to build up a little muscle in his neck. Like there's no really rhyme or reason to it. He was just going this way, or he was going the other way, or whatever. So what's your thought on the horizontal, vertical, and then like types of rubs that you maybe would pay more attention to in the woods?
Yeah, as far as the horizontal versus vertical, honestly, don't have a ton of experience with horizontal rubs. Honestly, the only time I really see horizontal rubs is when I'm running the chainsaw on big properties and it's really low hunting pressure and there's a lot of bucks around. You tend to see some pretty cool deer sign on properties like that. And there's a lot of horizontal rubs that show up, but I don't know if it's just because of the vegetation type. Like I know I've seen people like actually put like setups for those horizontal rubs and everything. And it seems like a cool thing, just never really anything that I've put much thought into to really have an opinion one way or the other. But as far as what types of rubs are important to me, I really like finding those big historical signpost rubs. In the hills, you get that random red cedar that's up there, and that's usually where you're going to find that rub that's been hit for generations, is what it seems like, because it's like dented in. And I'm not necessarily using that rub as any kind of indication of what the deer movement should be in that area. More so just, I feel like those rubs show up in like the individual ridge systems where I typically find big bucks consistently. Whatever it is about it, I can't say that I can tie too much to it, but anytime, I guess it's almost like you turning your brain on a little bit sharper anytime you see one of those, because you know, like, okay, there's some big deer hanging out in this area. But other than that, I really like directional rubs, just ones that are in some type of line that you can follow. And generally I'm finding those in pretty close proximity to point bedding, or just any bedding in general, honestly, where you're getting a direct exit or entry route into that bed, or in the occasion, like I would see this a lot when I was growing up hunting the swamps in mid-Michigan, where if a buck was bedded out on like a little cattail island or something, there would only be like a 50-yard stretch where he would come in and out of that island, and he would have like the whole edge of that 50-yard stretch just shredded with rubs. So I would call those directional too. So those are definitely the ones that I'm looking for, where they're like all on the same side of the tree, but they're in a pretty well-defined line.
Now that's one thing that I hunted. Well, I thought I was hunting a rub line before, right? And I was just like, okay, there's a bunch of rubs in a line. Like, I feel like not every rub line is created equal. Like, it might just be like an area where they're right before feeding, right? Like, they might just be going this way to get the food, and then it might just stop for a while. But like, if you follow those rubs, like I've been doing that more too this year, is like I see a rub, I'm trying to follow that. Now, it might not be in a direct line, but you'll see maybe another rub like 200 yards away or something like that. Okay, I'm going to head to that rub and see what's after that. So like, it's not going to be like you're walking and you see one rub, it's like another 10, 20 yards, you're going to see another rub. Like, you may see that, especially when, like, for what I saw was like right near bedding, like is where I saw it, where it's like it's consistently a couple trees down. That's where I saw that.
Definitely. Yeah. And I feel like I think you hit the nail on the head where you said they're not all created equal. They're definitely not, and each one's different. But the more you get out there and see that kind of like directional type of rub, it's just going to become that second nature to you, where I have a pretty good idea. Like, now when I see that type of sign, usually, like, I can look for those directional rubs leading out to a point, and then it's like before you even get to that point, you got a pretty good idea that there's going to be a buck bed out there. But it's not always like a noticeable rub, in the sense that you can just like see it and like look. And I actually picked this up from a guy I started hunting with this last fall. I've texted him back and forth before this, but we finally got to spend some time together out in the woods this last fall. And this dude he's sharp, man. He really gets it. And watching, I was explaining to him when we were out there, it was a piece of public I hunted a lot, and he had never been into this system before. I was explaining to him like where I thought the bucks were living, things like that. And then watching him dissect the sign of where he thought like the bucks were entering in, and the rubs that he was looking for. You can't call them rubs because they're just like little nick marks on the very soft wood trees. And I mean, lo and behold, like, we would walk and we would follow a line and then get right out to where these bucks were bedded. So it's not always like these well-polished, easy to find rubs where it's just like you're playing a game of a 3-year-old's connect the dots picture. It's like sometimes you really got to look and find it, but it's there. You'll be able to see for sure. So any kind of directional rub line like that, though, whether it's obvious or just those little nick marks, man, there's a story to be told behind those for sure.
I did see that because those nick marks. I saw that last time I was out scouting, not with my daughter, because I never would want to walk down this hill with my daughter on my back because it's very dangerous. I fell myself, so but like I saw as they were going straight down this hill, like they're not going to make a rub on the steep hill, but like I saw like on this pine tree, there's like little nicks here and there.
Yep.
So it's like I don't know, like is it intentional that they're putting that? Like that's not like a why thing. Like I'm thinking like why are they doing this in this spot? Like it's steep. They're going straight down the hill. Are they doing it intentionally, or like maybe it's like are they trying to like stop themselves from going down too fast?
Right.
You know, it's like, but there's sign right there that there was a buck coming through here, or was his rack too big to go down between these trees where he had to nick it?
Yeah,
like,
I definitely know like that's the case in a lot of the stuff that I'm targeting here is the newer growth logging cuts where that early successional growth that comes up, it's very tight compacted. And I mean, it's stuff that if you didn't know that older bucks lived in there that were these massive rack deer, like you'd think there's no way that he's walking through that. It just doesn't make any sense. But then you start to figure out like, oh, okay, he just bumping his head on a bunch of stuff on the way down and he's leaving all these little marks. And I think like for where I hunt, that's just the case is they just can't fit through there and they just got to kind of push their way through and make it happen.
Yeah, that's the first time I saw those like little tick marks. I mean, there's a few instances where I've seen a deer just like I feel like when they're more mature, they don't lay down big sign like that. They don't, because like the one I'm my number one for next year. I'm not going to say I'm just going after him because I'm not that kind of hunter. I'm just going to go after him. But like I have a video of him and he looks like he's about to make a rub, but it says he just goes like and just walks away. So he just like touches it with his antlers and walks away.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It is interesting. That's cool.
So one other thing that I think I never thought about that I heard on another podcast, deer scat. Like if you think about it, we don't go when we're uncomfortable, right? When we're not in a comfortable place. Sure. A deer I feel like a deer now will only defecate where it feels comfortable. So if you find an area with a lot of deer crap, or just it in general, that's an area you probably might want to focus on, because like a deer's not going to just go anywhere.
100%. I definitely agree with that. And I'm very, very amateur level when it comes to tracking deer, like following their tracks in the snow and hunting them. But I read a lot of books on it growing up and listened to some podcasts, things like that, of like the guys that do it up in Maine. And I do it at our deer camp in the Upper Peninsula. Anytime we get a fresh snow, I'll go out there and find a big track and just follow it. And I noticed that I've seen it enough times now that anytime that a buck is getting close to a feeding area or a bedding area, because it's snow, so you can see there's fresh scat like right there. And so it's definitely something I could see how you can just correlate it right to them feeling comfortable. Like the way that I looked at it is that it's more so I'm really close to where they're bedding or feeding. But I mean, obviously if a deer's bedding or feeding, then they're going to be comfortable, because they don't do those things either unless they're comfortable. So I definitely agree with that. I mean, obviously there's just random times you're going to find piles of scat, but like you said, like when you're finding more in an area, that's probably a place that those deer are spending time in a comfortable state, and that's what you're looking for sure.
I would even go to say like those important scrapes that maybe you should hang a camera over would be those ones that have that deer scat in it. Like I think that's like a very important one. Like I even found one where there was actually hair in it too. So like there was a scrape with deer scat and then also hair in it as well. So it was like, is this a bed or a scrape? Because there's licking branch right here. Like what's going on?
Absolutely. Yep. No, I definitely pay attention to scat as much as I do any other type of sign. I think that any and all type of deer sign like that is just another data point that you can use to further craft a better strategy when you're out there.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to touch on?
I don't think so, man. I think, you know, I got a ton of thoughts that always are rambling through my head, but I think that we covered a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to cover this: hard versus soft edges.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still trying to learn that. So
Yep.
what would be your best like example of a hard versus soft edge?
Yeah. So to me, like a hard edge is when you're making some type of transition between like a mature stand of timber and a field. So that's going to be a hard edge where it's like very abrupt that you're going from one vegetation type to another vegetation type, where a soft edge is maybe just where a 3-year-old logging cut butts up to a 5-year-old logging cut, where there's not a crazy amount of difference, but there is a difference there, and it's creating some type of edge. So that's how I view hard edges and soft edges. I find that there is more daylight activity around those soft edges. I know that from like my early years of hunting a lot of the farm country public land in Ohio, that hard edge between the timber and the field is definitely a really good place to find a lot of sign. But it's not really a place you're going to find a lot of daylight buck activity. But those soft edges where you're already kind of dealing with some pretty good vegetation, those are typically going to be nice little transition zones where you're catching deer.
Okay. Well, that answered my question. That helps me a lot. Hopefully
Yeah.
I can remember that come the season, but yeah.
Well, the good news is this is recorded. So if you have it, you can just always tie back in, get a timestamp and look back at it.
That's the best part, right? Because like for me, like it's kind of, I feel like kind of selfish because like I'm selfishly doing these episodes because I want to be a better woodsman, but yet I know other
Right.
people will also learn from it as well. So
Absolutely,
it's like,
man. Best of both worlds.
that's right. I can listen to this like 10 times before I actually release it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Greg. Well, I really appreciate you coming on here. Where can people follow you at and message you if they have any questions?
Yeah. So I have an Instagram page. I've recently updated the handle on that at the earlier part of this year just to better align with the brand that I have for like my business here in Ohio. So my Instagram is Greg_NextLevelWhitetail. And then I started dabbling on YouTube now as well. I got a few videos pumped out there for the spring scouting season that I put together. And then once my work slows down, I'm going to start getting back into putting more videos up on that. But that YouTube channel is just Next Level Whitetail. So that Next Level Whitetail is just really the business I'm trying to grow here in Ohio. So yeah, you can find me on either of those. Reach out to me, direct message me on Instagram, and I'm always happy to talk deer hunting.
Cool, man. Really appreciate you coming on here and helping with the Woodsmanship series.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. It was a great
Absolutely,
time.
dude. Yeah. Always enjoy talking deer.
Yeah, for sure.